Welcome to Foundation. Today we are talking to Om Malik, who is the founder of GigaOM.com, one of the most popular tech websites out there. He's also a journalist and venture capitalist. Let's talk to him. So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Delhi, in India. Lived there for early part of my life. Moved out to the West and eventually to the US and about 20 plus years ago. So
how'd you end up coming out to the US? Like, what was it about the States that you wanted to get out here?
I've always wanted to be a writer. And when I was growing up in India, it was pretty obvious to me that I was aiming to be like really successful as a writer. And what that meant to me was essentially not being successful in money terms, but successful in what I did. And as I became more and more enamored with news and journalism and reporting, I realized that New York was the center of the universe. Like, I needed to succeed at a much larger stage. So hence I came to New York.
Did you ever, were you always into tech journalism, or was that, so you started off just traditional covering like the news beat, or like what was?
I started out covering teenage news stuff for some teenage magazines back in India. I covered everything from, going to college and school competitions and writing about those. I wrote about, I used to do a compilation of songs, like all the music which was like really popular in the US and UK, and I would write synopses of like the top 10 charts and post that. I really was into music, so like really big time, so it was pretty natural for me to write about it.
How'd you get into tech though? Like, what was it about the technology industry that pulled you in?
So like when I was going through my early college years, I also went to like one of those professional schools to learn programming and stuff, just because you're growing up in India, you have to in order to get a job. And I got interested in writing software and stuff like that. I just wasn't really too enamored with the idea of working as a software guy. I think in 91 time frame, I stumbled upon a few articles about ARPANET and the information superhighway, and there was a lot of talk about it. I used to go down to the library, the American library in New Delhi called USIS, which is where all the magazines would come, and I essentially read about this, and something inside my head kind of said, this thing could actually be pretty big. And I had no idea why I felt that way. It was pretty natural thought in my head, and I said, what, I think I should go write about this. This is going to be a really big story.
And what year was this?
This was in like 91.
That was really early. Because no one had really heard about the internet at that point.
No, it wasn't really the internet, right? Like, I had read very early articles. It was just like, it just felt that this was something big, because I think the
as an industry, not about the internet. You mean just technology in general?
No, just this whole communication thing was like the big thing for me, because I was always very fascinated with communication, right? Like, and I would look at, like, we didn't really have phones growing up. And then we got a phone, and like our relationship with people in our family changed, and our neighborhood relationships changed, and like the way I interacted, I had suddenly more friends because I had a phone, because I could call more of my friends. And like, it was so expensive to have a phone that I had to actually like be very careful how much I used, but it had a big influence on this power of communication. And and it was essentially that same thought. Like, I used to write letters to people earlier, my friends, my relatives and all. I'm like very much into communicating, and And I think that was the whole thing which got me. It's like, wow, this information super high. I didn't really quite understand what it meant.
It was like a gut feeling then that you had. Like
Yeah, it was just
everything,
like
the right pieces were coming together.
Yeah. And it was just like I was too young to even know. I didn't even know technology really well. Like I didn't even own computer like till very late in my life. I just knew when I was reading this stuff and I said, wow, this is it. Like this could be big. And so I planned on coming out here and you know, that's how the story started.
So when did you, once you got out to the States, you started writing, when did you make the leap into like full-time tech writing? Where your focus was on tech?
So first 2 years, 3 years of my life, I was just like doing some, you know, writing for a couple of Indian newspapers. I wrote about spelling bees before they became cool. I don't know, like just my bad.
I don't know if they've ever become cool.
Dude, but they made a movie about it, so it must be cool, right?
Still.
It's like when I was doing that, it was just like, oh my God, I have to do this nonsense. And I wish I had thought about it and written a book or something. But I think it was in, like, I kept looking for ways in and I couldn't find a way in. Like for about 3 years or so, it was like pretty much every day of rejection. Like I would send my resume and people would look at my name and then my resume with like no American education, no Ivy League, barely got out of college. And you know, my clips were mostly from India, so nobody really cared. And so it was pretty fun to kind of go through that process of rejection, because it basically, the more I got rejected, the more resolute I became. It's like, damn it, I will prove you wrong. And the interesting part is that if the regular reporter jobs were not open, I said, well, you know, there's got to be a job for me out there. And I think the technology reporter job was like pretty nebulous at that time. So for 2.5, 3 years, I did all sorts of shit work. I basically worked in a couple of, you know, freelanced for Indian papers. I worked for an Indian community paper. I wrote, you know, freelance articles for like a lot of magazines like Crane's, New York Business, whosoever basically would take my work, you know, work part-time on the weekend, like help, you know, so you know that in New York they have a man with a truck kind of thing. So help your friend move other people and, you know.
So just odd jobs all over the place just to make
things,
ends meet pretty much.
Yeah, that was pretty hard. Initially it was pretty hard. That there were days when I always felt like that I should go back and just be a big fish in a small pond and go back to India. And I don't know, something prevented me from doing that. I just wanted to succeed so badly in the US. Like I just wanted to be somebody in the US media landscape.
So how did you break in? I mean, what was that point where you said you finally got your big break? And I mean, you've written for some major magazines.
So, you know,
how did that happen?
I kept going, Kevin, like just for a long time. Like after many, many, many months of rejection, I got one person who bought into my, you know, resume and asked me in. And that was a quick Nikkei news, and the guy's name was Steve Crandall, and he basically hired me. He took a big chance essentially and hired me, and that was it. And I was able to basically go from doing all sorts of stuff, you know, to just focus on technology writing. And I loved it. Like I've always cared so badly about like writing, and it was a big thing for me. It was a huge thing for me to get a break in tech writing. And I think the minute I started writing, I knew I had found my path, and I just knew what to do. Like and since then it's always been like basically showing up every day. And so he was a great editor, and he gave me the break. I worked for him. Then I heard that Forbes was going to launch Forbes.com. And by then I had like started my own websites, and I was pretty savvy about the programming of website, and like, I was learning all sorts of tricks. So this was like, I started a website called desiparty.com. Ooh.
What's it called?
Desiparty.com.
Daisy Party?
Yeah, which was like it was like a mailing list for.
Is this still up?
Yeah, it still is. Some other guys in New Jersey run it. I don't own it anymore. It was pretty. We ran it profitably. It was just a one-man operation.
Yeah.
It was like a mailing list, and then I turned it into it was like a nightclub mailing list, except then it became a listing service for all Indian parties on the web, and then it just became massive. And again, it even had like 3 copycats, and so
that's awesome.
Yeah,
you're doing something right when you start getting the clones.
And then I just kind of but my first love was not that. My first love was being a tech writer. And
so what makes a good tech writer? I mean, there's so many people that I see jumping into becoming with blogs taking off in the last 5-10 years. Like what is it that really drives you and that compels you to write these stories? Like what?
I can't tell what drives other people. For other people, it may have been a vocation. I mean, a job. For me, it's been like, it's the only thing that matters to me. It's like I couldn't care less. I still get wake up in the middle of the night and like, really, people are paying me to do this? Because I love writing so much. And I never thought of it as a job. I've never thought of it as I was writing when I was unemployed. I was writing when I was a kid, and I'm going to be writing even after I've retired. But that's the only thing. So for me, that's what writing is. Tech, I think just what I love about tech and writing about tech is that tech is just so fast and so changing that it's like going to school every day. Like every day I meet one smart person and he or she teaches me something new. For me, that just is like the greatest feeling ever. I couldn't give, this is it. For me, it's just like I start the day dumb and I learn something new and I end the day with 20 more questions. For me, that is a great day. It's
stimulating to you.
That's it. It's like going to school every day, and there's not a single day I don't get up and I just say wow, this is like the greatest job in the world.
Well, I can see why you do tech investing as well, is because this plays naturally to that. I mean, it's the same idea. When I sit down with an entrepreneur and you talk to them and they give you your ideas and you hear something exciting, you get pumped up. You go and write about it and or invest. And I'm the same way. I go invest. I don't actually write about the startups.
Absolutely. I think the most interesting thing from my perspective is that when I meet somebody who has a great idea, or somebody who has this vision of technology or the world, and they can convince me that they actually do, it is like there's nothing more important, in my opinion, as a writer, for you to tell their story as honestly as possible. Because who knows, I just love the enthusiasm, the positivity of the tech industry. I think I grew up with a lot of hardship around me. We were not, in the India of 70s and 80s is very different than India of today, and it was not quite as optimistic a place as Silicon Valley is, right? So I love the optimism of technology. You may not find a lot of it in my writing. At times I get a little too cranky and cynical, but I like to keep everything in perspective as well. But I love the optimism of technology. That's what I like to write about technology. And I think the world today is so much more different than, say, 20 years ago when I was trying to break into tech writing. Today, if you're good, you don't need a publication to break into tech writing. You're just good, right? There's been last 4 days, I've read 10 great pieces, right? There's some guy there are 2 articles about Sparrow being acquired by
Google.
Yeah. And I would have written those pieces, but these guys did a better job than I did. And they got discovered, and they're on top of Tech Meme, and they're on Hacker News, and they're on the social web, and that's great. And like, who cares if they're not with some famous publication? They just wrote some good stuff. So today, I think it's a great time to be a tech writer, as long as you're willing to put work into it.
So you think the quality rises to the top? It's not about the brand; it's more about the person that's writing the article.
I mean, this is what the social discovery has become, right? Like, and there's, believe me, it's so fun to read great stuff. Like, just fun, like, because this is my art, this is my craft, this is my people. I mean, I couldn't care less who they write for, as long as they do great job. And and because when they do a great job, then I feel like doing a better job too. So and so for me, that's the way to think about tech. And I think this is a good time to be a tech writer.
So take me back to when you made the jump, because when I first met you in traditional media, print, and then at one point in time, you said, I'm going to go off and I'm going to become an entrepreneur, and I'm actually going to take the jump from writer to writer/entrepreneur and start your own startup, your own domain. What was taking you through that thought process?
So, it's not really very that difficult and that different than my life. Coming to this country is pretty much starting all over, right? So it was like the startup of me. I was going to come here and figure out my business plan and go. This is my idea, and I had to follow it, and I have to be successful. Very similar to being a startup, right? So, and then when I started Desi Party, it was essentially the same. So I learned how to bootstrap something and be small and efficient and do things by myself. I think when you met me, I was working for Business 2.0, and that was in 2004 is when we met. And I'd been blogging for about 3.5 years till then. And I was not quite entirely done with the print media, because I was learning the craft of writing long form, stories. And I was working for Business 2.0. And then in 2004, 2005, I had this idea of starting a newspaper for the internet, which was essentially driven by the sentiment. Like, the idea was that we would take all these signals from the Google API and all these places and create this always changing newspaper where the headlines and the front page would change based on how the internet was behaving. I actually almost convinced two really famous people to join me in that endeavor. One was Mike Abbott he's now with Kleiner Perkins, and he was at Twitter for a while, and Sar, who now works for CRV. We actually game planned the whole thing, and we really spent a lot of time, but they found better things to do and they moved on. And then I think I was very clear by then that I was going to go do something of my own. It wasn't really, I just felt that the traditional media was just stifling me, and they would not understand that the tech business is so fast changing that we need a medium which would change and report as quickly. And I think that was it. For me, that was
the cycle was too long? Is that the idea?
Yeah, the cycle was too long. And the newspapers and the magazines like Fortune and all these people, they didn't really care. They care only when the things are going well. They don't really care when things go down. They're also corporate entities, so they have to do what's right for them. I don't blame them for doing that, but there was there's nobody who was chronicling the tech the way it's supposed to be, right? Every day things were happening, new things were coming up, things were dying, things were cropping up, and I always felt this is just a better way of doing it. And I think Michael Arrington caught that zeitgeist pretty well, and and he did a great job of that, and he caught the spirit of the time, the speed, and all those kind of things. I think that was it for me. I said, okay, I am done working, and I'm going to go do this thing on my own. I think every month I saw the traffic grow up, and more people would sign up for the site and leave comments, and more people would suddenly they would start noticing me more for my blog then for my magazine writing, and I think something changed. So in 2005, 2006, early 2006, I went to Tony Schneider, who was the CEO of WordPress, and I was talking to him. I was like, I don't know, man, I'm feeling a little bit rusty in this job. It's not working out. I need to do something different. And he says, well, why don't you? It's like,
Yeah.
okay. I said, yeah, why don't I? Right? Like, it was like literally that was it. And I came home, and it was on a weekend, and I said, okay. And then I called him on a couple of weeks later, and I said, you know what? I'm actually going to do it. Now I need to figure out how to raise money for this. And he basically introduced me to the rest of the True partnership. So Tony Schneider introduced me to Tony Conrad, and they introduced me to the rest of the True gang, and they just gave me a seed investment, and we were off to the races. I mean, it just happened that fast.
So tell me about Gome, because you've done quite a few things over the years. You've taken and started off as, you know, a technology-based blog. You've hired a bunch of writers. Then you spun up some conferences as well. Is that like, how does that break out? And then did you hire a CEO as well?
Yeah. So my initial idea of Gome was that, you know, we would build like a holistic technology media company. It was not, and even from the early days, it wasn't like, this idea wasn't to just be based on advertising, because I always felt that if you were too based on advertising, then you would just be doing certain things. And what is that I wanted to do was the important question for me. So I looked at my always, whenever I write from, will this make my readers happy? Like, readers are my number one customer. So everything I do or decisions I make are based on that thought process. So we said, if we kept pushing the page view game, we're not going to be very successful, and we're not going to make that much money, and the readers are not going to be happy, whatever. So I looked at what my skill sets were, which was like thoughtful, analytical, long form, sometimes, you know, like futuristic take on technology, and the business of technology, not just technology for technology's sake. And I said, okay, this is our core essence. Let's focus on that. And I think in 2007, we did our first conference. And the idea was, so let's try, see what happens. Let's try these small conferences about niche topics and see if we can find people to talk about it. So we did that, and it actually proved to be very successful, the first one. I didn't expect it to be, but it did, and it's great. But then I fell sick in 2007, and so that's when we brought in Paul, who was at that time the COO, and gave him the CEO's title. And I actually said, okay, let's focus on what we know best and double down on it. So we said, okay, we are about analysis about the business of technology. So we're going to do a website, we're going to do events based on that philosophy, and what else can we do? So we ended up starting a research business, which is Gome Pro. And more recently, we've started Gome Books, basically the same logic. The idea is that we are not going to do the most, but we are going to do things which make most sense from our perspective. So it's the CEO, Paul Warborski is our CEO. He's been running the company since January 2008. And I think that he's the best thing that happened to the company. He's you know, he runs it like he's running a SaaS business. Like, he has, you know, average revenue per user. He calculates basically, you know, how many people are coming to the site, like wires, like he's running it just like you would run a software company. That's how he runs it. He has his own dashboard. We have internal sales team.
That's awesome.
So it's like, you know, media company run like a software company. That's the way we do things. It's been an interesting journey. It's been 6 years plus some more of learning and doing this.
What are you going to do? Is this always going to be a private company? Would it ever be part of something larger? Like, what's your long-term vision for where you take the product?
So we have investors, right? So I can't really be too definitive about anything, but we are really growing and growing pretty strongly. And I see no reason why I need to do anything else. This is freaking great.
I love that I get to ask you these questions. Now you ask me the deep
I
questions for so many years.
I know. No, but for me, it's just like this. I love this gig. Like I love what I do. I love what we built. I love the people I work with. I mean, I can't wait. I mean, I get up at 4:30 just to check how we are doing. You know, what's the world looking like? Because I am, you know, I'm still excited. 6 years later, it's still the thing which floats my boat. So I have like no reason to go anywhere, you know.
So one of the things that you mentioned a second ago was your long-term take on technology. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on, you know, what is floating your boat. I don't know if that sounds right, but what gets you excited? Like, where do you think, you know, a few years from now things are going? Is there any new hot area or sector that you're like really pumped on?
So I think in order to understand how I think is you have to look at the iPhone. Okay. The iPhone on surface is just a freaking phone. It's a touch screen and whatever. But if you really look at it, underneath it's the culmination of many, many technologies, right? It has sensors, it has touch, it has, you know, mobile internet, it has so many things built into it that took about 5 to 6 years to come together into this perfect package which Apple put together, right? So that's how I think about technology. So there isn't a hard sector. I look at all these variables in the world and see if I can connect the dots and, you know, create like a proper picture. So from that perspective, I am super excited, like literally super excited about this idea of connectivity. Like everything will be connected. That is what drives most of my thinking. My view is, and this has been my view since '99, is that just like the PC had the microprocessor, the internet has the bandwidth. Broadband is the microprocessor of the internet. More broadband we have, more interesting things are going to happen. And now we've come to a point where the bandwidth has entered pretty much everyday life, and it's just getting into like every little thing which is around us. You know, our freaking thermostats are getting, you know, wired, and soon our TVs and you know, our fridges and, you know, our
So you're seeing all these devices coming online,
right,
basically.
And then in order to for all this data to come together, they're all connected. They all will be generating data. That all that data will be coming together. All that data will come together on what is essentially the cloud compute, right? The compute cloud. And on top of that, there will be, you know, software written to make sense of that data. I think that's where the opportunity is, to make the software which actually thinks and asks questions like many humans do. Make the internet more human, but at every level. I think that's the big opportunity. I don't think there is a hard sector or not. There is just like, there is a hard area of focus.
Do you see any companies that are catching your eye right now? Like, what are some examples of companies that get that and that are doing that today?
I think one of the companies which I love is a company called Kaggle. They're trying to do some interesting things with big data. Again, boring, less known company. I love what the guys at Highlight are doing as an app. I'm not sure they're quite there yet. I think, you know, Donna is doing something interesting. I can't really talk about it more than that. You know, I think Google Now is a pretty spectacular idea. I think those are like the germs and of like what could be like a really big contagion.
It's early days.
Like, very. So whole bunch of like, you know, I've met many companies who I can't mention their names, mostly because they made me sign an NDA. They're doing, you know, like companies which are helping put together essentially the equivalent of WordPress for big, you know, for connected devices, right? Like that kind of like massive platform. So there's a lot of interesting stuff out there.
Do you think we'll see a lot more hardware companies?
we will see a lot more hardware thinking.
Hardware like integrated.
Yeah.
You're talking about dumb devices coming online for the first time.
Yeah. But the fact that Microsoft and Google decided that they have to do hardware is a good sign that we need to be thinking about hardware as much as we think about software.
What do you think about Kickstarter?
I love Kickstarter.
Do you think we'll see some big ideas come out of there?
Oh yeah, like it's already changing so many things. I didn't last I checked, like they had 12 movies on Sundance were Kickstarter financed, and yeah, you know, they have their own set of challenges and, you know, a lot of unfinished projects and whatnot. But I think it's fundamentally redefining the idea of creation and economy per se, right? Like, because it really makes it possible for a thing which has only got 100,000 customers to exist, right? Like, I mean, earlier you couldn't start a business based on this notion that, oh, there's only 50,000 people or 100,000 people who want the Pebble watch. Like, you know, I don't know, it's like 115,000 pledges. It's not that many, right? But and so no professional investor would finance that thing. But Kickstarter helps you, me, and every other watch geek get close to Pebble and just say, okay, I'm buying this. I'm voting it with my dollars. Let's make it happen, right? That is a very powerful thing. And I think that is going to be even more pervasive. I wrote this post a year ago or 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Basically, I said that Kickstarter is the single most important company in Fred Wilson's portfolio, which is full of really good names like Twitter and Etsy and stuff. And the reason I said, because it is about social change. It's a social movement. It's going to redefine the very core of economy. It may not be Kickstarter itself, but the idea behind Kickstarter is so powerful. But the reason Kickstarter exists is because of the bandwidth, the broadband, because you've got these phones and connections worldwide, and suddenly the world is not like the US market or the Chinese market or the Japanese market. It's Android watch fans. Right? Who gives a shit where they live? They're all coming to Kickstarter. Yeah. That's the power of broadband. And I think so broadband, that's like PC allowed you to create all these beautiful documents. And broadband allows you to do a lot of things.
So you dabble in personal investing as well?
No, not personal. For True Ventures.
Right, so. For True Ventures. So, are you at all concerned that with the Jobs Act allowing, more personal investing and things like Kickstarter, does this impact VCs and angels in any way?
So what?
You think it's a good thing?
Yeah. Creativity and innovation cannot be defined by industries and sectors and they cannot be defined as freaking asset classes. So they have to. I don't care where the next big idea comes from, right? So I am in support of whatever works. We have a planet which has so many challenges. We have people who are so brilliant. We are people who are not connected. If we don't harness that connectivity and that connections and that ability to communicate, I think we have a missed opportunity.
Yeah, the thing for me though on Kickstarter is when I look at it, there's been these stories about them not being able to deliver products on time, especially when it has to do with electronics and manufacturing, just because of the complexities that exist in those industries, that some of these people that have these great ideas don't have the experience, right? And so for us, I'm sure you've done this with your own company. When you take money from venture, you can go out and you're taking money from them because they have an area of expertise that you don't, right? And so you can lean on them for help. Do you think that, one of the big problems I see with Kickstarter is that, I go out there, I create this cool prototype for a Pebble watch, I have a little bit of manufacturing experience, not much, wouldn't I need traditional venture or someone that has 20, 30 years of manufacturing experience to help me out with that?
Sure. Why not? There is many different models of doing this. I think Kickstarter gets too pigeonholed because of all this attention it gets from the tech world.
Yeah.
Kickstarter itself, though, is much more influential in terms of creating movies, documentaries,
Right.
music. That was the primary motive of Kickstarter. I think that
That
is,
seems like that's its sweet spot more than anything else.
it is the sweet spot, and that's what, like, I think Perry Chen is probably one of the one of the smartest people in the whole creative sector. So he knows exactly what's right for the music industry because he's a ex-music guy, and the movies, right? So let's not just get too carried away about the gadgets,
Right.
right? And somebody should start a Kickstarter for just gadgets and stuff with a different kind of rules and different kind of regulations for that. And why not?
So one of the things that I always ask guests on the show to kind of wrap things up is that you've been around the block, you've hustled, sounds like almost your entire life. Like, what are some things? I always ask give me one piece of advice that if there's somebody out there that wants to break into the writing scene or to start the new company, what's something that you would always take with you and do again over and over again? And then one big mistake that you would tell people to avoid at all costs.
Two things I can say, both like essentially. One is do what you actually really give a shit about. Like something you would want to do for the rest of your life. It's pretty easy to figure out. There is no playbook to be a founder. There is no playbook to be an entrepreneur. You kind of figure shit out as you go along, and don't worry if you don't have the answers. Don't worry if you're failing. Don't worry if your knees are somebody hits you when you're down. You just need to do what you love. Like, you have to do what you love. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, I mean, one life, why would you spend it on things you don't really care about? And I think it takes a lot. It's like I was blessed by the fact that I knew what I wanted, right? Mm-hmm. So that was it. The mistake I think most people make, I would not like anyone else to make that mistake, is make decisions based on money. Make decisions based on what you love. Like,
did you do that at one point?
I did. I've made some decisions in life which were based on maybe I will get more money, maybe I will make, and I'm not so sure it was the smartest thing to do at that time, and I would never do that. Like, there's no decision I make on money anymore.
Like, give me an example, like picking the wrong job or...
Yeah, and I took a job as an H&Q as an investment manager in like during the bubble, because I thought, oh, that would be the cool thing to do. And I ended up making a ton of money, but boy, I hated every minute of it. I think I hated it the minute I landed. I was like, what am I doing here? I'm not talking to any interesting people. I'm not talking to any interesting startups. I'm just doing this because it's paying me a lot of money. And I was miserable. I couldn't sleep for 6 months. I was just terrible. And I said, okay, that's it. I walked out, went back to being a writer, took a massive pay cut, but I was happy, and that's all that mattered to me. I don't think it's a business decision. Like, life is not a business decision. It's not. And I wouldn't, look, I'm not saying don't be successful and don't make money. Please do. That's what, success is all about. I think to make decisions based on money is a bad idea.
Yeah.
So, I remember once I said to some bunch of entrepreneurs that it's always about the money. It is always about the money. You will succeed and you will care about all those things. I just think if you start putting money above everything else, that's a bad decision.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the lessons you learn over a long period of time.
So if anyone has an idea to pitch you or they want to find you online, how do they do that?
Just, I'm at Om on Twitter, and occasionally you will see my writing on Gome, and you can go to om.co, which is my personal blog.
I didn't know you had a personal blog.
I have a personal blog which I write about baseball, music, fashion.
That's awesome.
And I just show off the broadband speed of my network at home, which is like 200 megabits.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You got one of those business lines, don't you? Where
No, I got like a regular, just fiber Ethernet connection.
That's
going.
amazing.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thanks for being on the show, Om.
Thank you, Kevin.
See you soon.
It was fun to be on your show.
Awesome.
Take care.
Last episode, we talked about the custom installed KEF speakers. I actually fell in love with these speakers during Dignation and got them installed in the house. This week, Toaster is going to give you a little demo. Toast? It does sound good. Music sounds different in these speakers. Pretty awesome. If you want to learn more about KEF's CI line or any of the speakers that you've seen featured here, head on over to kefdirect.com and use the coupon code FOUNDATION for 15% off.